All right. Ella, Kim, and Lois, thank you so much for being here tonight. You know that I'm Amy with Cycle Forward, and we're here to talk about the very interesting topic of naysayers. The question for tonight's curiosity series is, do we respect trail naysayers, and should we? So I'm excited to dig into this topic. And before we do, though, I'd like for you just to introduce yourselves. If you wouldn't mind just saying who you are, where you are, and what brings you here tonight. I think that should probably be a good start. So let's go, Kim, Lois, and Ella.
Okay. Kim Harris, and I have been involved with outdoor recreation and trail building for about 17 years now. That kind of blows my mind when I think about that. But I work for the Oil Region Alliance, and we do economic development, some of it non-traditional, based around the outdoor recreation that we do. And I also serve as a secretary on the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail. So I'm a trail advocate and work with a lot of communities.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Lois?
You want me to go? Okay, I'm Lois Turco, and I'm living in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I've been involved with the Canal Towns Partnership since 2009. We formally started the organization in 2011 with the help of Kathy McCullum and Amy Camp. It's modeled on the Trail Towns program, which you all probably are familiar with. Right now it's 9 towns, and we're a 2-state project, and it's 5 counties now. We're down to Montgomery County, from Allegheny County down to Montgomery County in Maryland, and 3 West Virginia towns. So we work with the towpath of the C&O Canal, and we're partners with them and the Canal Trust and all the towns and town councils and tourism entities along, the 9 towns and 5 counties and 2 states. So it's a big project, and we're really a very, let's just say, energetic community development project, and the towns have benefited greatly from our partnership. So that's me.
Good. Thanks, Lois. Ella?
I'm Ella Belling. You can hear my cat Jasper in the background, which for you dog owners, that might be a problem. I am with the Mon River Trails Conservancy. I'm the executive director, which is a rail trail organization based out of Morgantown, West Virginia. And it's 48 miles in 3 counties. We're part of, Kim, we're part of the Industrial Heartland Trails Coalition, which is much bigger undertaking to try to get all these 1,500 miles of rail trails connected. And my job, as an executive director, I've worked on building rail trail. I'm showing age too. I've been on it at this 20 years. So we have built trail, we have built connectors into neighborhoods, which were off of the rail corridor. Certainly work on the advocacy and the trail town component and the promotion and maintaining. My probably 95% of my job is now just making sure the trail is maintained and restored after every storm, and trees are cleared, and just making sure that it's functioning right as a trail. But I think a lot about your questions months before, Amy, and I'm sure I think about them way after we have these conversations. But I always think I'd like to hear what experiences people may have had in their positions. It seems like most of us are coming at this tonight with already having established trail, and already working on kind of a set where the trail will be. Like I always, it's going to be where the railroad was, so that's where the trail will be, or that's where the canal, towpath was, so that's where the trail will be, and not necessarily having to draw a different route or something. So,
well, I think that's an important distinction, because if you have a route or if you have existing trail, that could change the kinds of discussions you might be having with people who may be opposed to them. So I'm glad that you brought that out. And Ella, I just want to disagree with you about one thing. I think that, you're just showing your wisdom and experience whenever you've told us how long you've been involved. And I'm just like looking at the four of us and just thinking, wow, what a great combination of experience. And whenever I'm picturing it on the map, also, that's kind of fun to see how spread apart we are, but still connected. So thanks for being here. I think you all probably saw the ground rules that I set for the series. The only ones I want to point out are that the reason I'm doing this series is that I wanted to be in conversation with people who are curious and who are interested in questions and might not know all of the answers and are okay with that and are okay with exploring that. So you may have noticed that I'm hoping that we all can approach, with the spirit of curiosity, and that we know that it's okay that we might not have all the answers. And then the other thing is, you may have seen that the bit about the recording. I am recording, but we're going to vote at the end whether we want this recorded discussion to be shared or not. And I mean that most sincerely. I want you to be able to speak freely tonight, and we'll decide by anonymous poll whether you want others to be privy to this conversation. So how's that all sound?
Fine.
Wonderful.
All right, good deal. So I think we all know what a naysayer is, but I looked it up for the sake of it. Naysayers are people who criticize, object to, or oppose something, right? So we all have encountered naysayers in our lives. We all have probably been naysayers. And the question on the table is, do we respect trail naysayers? And part 2 of that is, should we? So I don't know if this needs a whole lot of setup or not, but I will just say that I come out of the field of community development and then got, into trails, which is just another form of community development. We've all been to community meetings. We've all had experiences where we have hoped that nobody would show up in opposition. We've all been frustrated when people have, and at the end of the day, if we're trying to build trails and build community, people who oppose what we're trying to do, they stand in our way, right? They stand in our way of our goals and of our vision, and that's why this question is on the table, because I think it's an important topic. How do we then deal with that opposition?
So I'm willing to start. I can say I used to shrivel at the thought of a naysayer standing up at the meeting saying, no, I don't want this. This is wrong. There's no use for this. But I have to say, as community support has grown for trail development or outdoor recreation in general, I'm more apt to now listen to the naysayer and try to find out why. Because there's always that underlying reason why. And then I hope and pray that reason why I can at least address. So I am changing in that process, and I find myself more and more. An example I know in a community I'm working in now, I'm gonna say 7 years ago, they wanted nothing to do with the trails, absolutely nothing. And we tried to figure out why. What was the reason they didn't want a trail? Because it's a small community, there's families, there's a school. Why would you not want something that nice there? And then we went back, and what we have found out, even more so, is community members have built on the railroad corridor that was not theirs. So it's kind of acknowledging that. And the trail, the person who owns the trail property, we've talked with them, and we don't want to make them move what they have. So we're looking to them to help us find a different route through the community.
Okay.
So, yeah. But yeah, I used to shrivel at the thought of it. Just like, I didn't want confrontation.
You know, honestly, I don't think I would be that considerate. I think, you know, like if I heard, and I have it a lot, you know, where we have folks who, I can't think of the word, but, you know, put their own garage or with their own, you know, property onto the property line, and have taken, you know, assumption that that's now their trail corridor, or I mean, that's their property and it's not a railroad corridor anymore. You know, it's this idea of like, well, I've been, you know, the assumption that, oh, well, I've been here forever, and so, you know, squatters' rights or something, I don't know what it's called, but this idea of, you know, and I'm watching that in West Virginia with the Yak River Trail and some other trails where people have used this corridor for their driveway and you know, drive up and down it, and because the road got washed out or their other access, you know, has been changed, and I think about you know, what that means, whether I should then accommodate that. And you know, I want to know what respect means, I guess, ultimately, when we have these questions, because I think that there also is the respect for public property, and there is the respect for community development, and there's the respect for not trashing public lands, and, you know, some other things that I've witnessed prior to trail, right? Like if I walked a railroad corridor prior to trail, which I've done in the trails that are now built and 20 years old, and we had illegal landfills and abandoned car lots, and, you know, the transformation of, we now care, this is someplace special now, this is someplace people care about, whereas before it was where I could dump without any people looking at it, or where I could do, you know, something else. So I don't want to talk too, I want more of a conversation, but I'm just saying, I think that it's interesting to hear you say, you know, like I'll reroute for you, right?
I do agree with what you're saying with the respect in it, because the corridor that connects to this community that we're working on, exactly what we found was all the trash, televisions, you know, all kinds of things. So I think in this area, it's more trying to pick your battles, because the community does want the trail to go down their main street area of the community, where the rail corridor is way off from that. So without having the whole picture, but you're right. Yeah. I think up here it's trying to build a better respect, because, and hopefully working with these community members, then it gets back down to the people who have thrown this trash in the past that, okay, we have this really nice trail now that we need to respect.
Mm. And where you live, Kim, you might have to see those people in the grocery store next week, right? You know, so it also,
absolutely.
Yeah, me
you know,
too. I get it.
I mean, they
Yeah.
basically know my name from, oh, I'm going to say from Venango County, southern border, all the way to Erie, and they know who I am. And I'm like you in a sense that I want respect, and I'll give you respect. I mean, but yeah, I still cringe at the thought with naysayers, but I'm able to confidently stand up in front of the people now at these public meetings and at least listen to their concerns. I may not be able to address them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you know that most people just need to be heard, and would like to get their way, but also being heard goes a long way in community settings and in relationships and in life. But I'm going to ask Lois to jump in and share some of her thoughts.
Well, we're kind of a little bit different situation right now with the canal towns connecting the towpath to the towns. We've done a pretty good job with signage that directs people from the towpath into our towns. I was at a Canal Towns Partnership meeting today, so I thought this was a very good time to highlight a little town at Williamsport, Maryland, that this is where we had our meeting today. We met with a group of real estate and community developing group of women, 5 women who have put together a business to buy up properties on Main Street in Williamsport and create cafe, a bakery, and a restaurant, and residential units on top of the properties. They have been very successful over the COVID time period because they're native Williamsport women. They all grew up in Williamsport, and they initially encountered some negative feedback from the good old boys that owned a lot of the property on the main street. But because they were insiders, not outsiders, they listened carefully to the naysayers and to integrate the naysayers' backgrounds of being old-time residents of Williamsport into a new environment where they kind of not indoctrinated, but informed the old timers about the benefits of the tourism coming off of the towpath. The bikers that came down, that we have hundreds of bikers coming down from Cumberland and from Pittsburgh. I mean, it's just overwhelming. And they have money. They have expensive bicycles. They stay at B&Bs. They want to eat in a nice cafe. And the old timers just couldn't understand why people wanted to come into Williamsport. You know, it's like it was their town and somebody is coming in to their town. And so the 5 women got together, held meetings with these people, you know, showed them their vision. And over a period of 2 years now, they have successfully bought 3 properties, redone them, created the residential units, and are now actively putting in another, like a brew pub right off the towpath so that they could, you know, riders can come right up and into town, right in a direct trail from the towpath to the main street. Now, it's not a rail trail. It's right on the, you know, on the road, but there's a bicycle lane. So it's somewhat safe, I say. So in our
So do you
case,
think that
our
they
trail,
changed their minds? I just want to ask real quick. Do you think they changed the minds of the men?
we asked them, and several of the men have now sold their property to this group
Ah,
because
Wow.
they said, you know, we're older, we're kind of tired of this business of, you know, managing these properties. And if you gals have made a success, you can give me a good price for this, take this off my hands and make something of it.
I want them to
And
go
they
on
have.
the road and you know, talk to other women about doing the
Right.
same in other towns.
This is a great community development model. It is it's called Port 44. Port is short for Williamsport. When these gals grew up in Williamsport and they wanted to go out on a date at night, they would say, let's go to the port. So they call Port 44.
All right.
And I'm telling you, it is very, I mean, Amy, it is so inspirational to
Mhm,
hear these success stories.
mhm.
Because in our towns, we've got 9 of them. Now, Cumberland is kind of an odd fellow because it's a large town and it's right on the Gap Trail intersection. So they have some of the problems that we've had in our other towns. Hancock, on the other hand, has a lot of resistance to change.
Mhm.
From the town council on down to the, you know, from the mayor, there's like, well, show me, you know, this
Mm.
kind of
A lot of naysayers.
defensive.
So I'm going to stop you
Um,
for a second, Lois, because I don't want to lose something that you brought up here. Between your story and between Kim's of like maybe like rerouting the trail and other stories I've heard about people coming into communities to make changes and accommodate longtime residents, like there seems to be like this like component of like sort of like almost bending over backwards to accommodate the long timers or the naysayers. And you know, I think instinctively I feel sometimes like, oh well, why should people have to do that? But at the same time, it often leads you to the results that you're looking for when and I see you nodding your head, yes, Kim.
Yeah.
Because this is community, right? These are all about relationships.
People
Yes.
listen to the community members, as Lois was saying, you know, those old timers, people in the community listen to them. So this
Mhm.
trail coming down this rail corridor that they built on wasn't as important as us getting the trail into town. So you weigh those. So the gentleman who built on that, working with him, saying, we do not want to make you move your building. You know, we will talk with the trail group that owns the corridor and see what their feelings are on that. But I think there's a resolution. Immediately, you could feel some of the stress being lifted between the parties sitting there talking. Is like, oh, well, if there's a way around this, I don't have to move my building. And on the other hand, the other residents who were resistant, I can't say they were totally 100% naysayers, but a little bit resistant to change, they'll listen to this gentleman because this gentleman happened to be a past mayor, past
Mhm.
council
Yeah.
person, a
Mhm.
leader
Yeah.
within the community.
Right.
Mhm. So I'm hearing like
Respected.
respected, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple of different of the reasons that people are opposed to trails or can be coming out in this conversation. And we don't need an exhaustive list for our conversation, but I just want to point out that the one I heard was they have some property or some personal reason that they don't want a trail to come through. I heard from you, Lois, that people may not believe that someone would want to come visit, that people would want to come visit their community. So if you don't believe that there's anything special about your community, why should there be an investment made into,
Right.
into trails? So those are a couple of like the whys that I've been hearing. I also sometimes places hear people that live in rural areas enjoy the rural life and live in rural areas for a reason and may not want more people coming in. So
Right.
so those are some of the whys that I'm hearing tonight.
Yeah, I think there, Amy, I think there's in very rural northwestern Pennsylvania, and I think there is a fear factor. Like you were saying, they want to remain rural, they want to isolated kind of from the rest of the world. I think there's a fear factor of newer people coming in. Not so much that they would do anything against the residents or residents' property, but it is kind of that mentality. If people find this and they like this, yes, they're going to come and you're going to change my community. I mean, which we have to admit, if a lot of people start coming to a community, it just changes naturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes back to our earlier conversations of change is going to happen. And if you don't have trail, or businesses or schools move out and your population is decreasing, you can see the opposite of,
Right.
I mean, you can see your town does not change, but it also doesn't draw new people living there or new businesses going in, or, I think we all, I'm not a great operator with change either, but I also hate to see my businesses, which I've witnessed recently, go out. And because they do have competition of dollar stores and whatever else popping up,
Right.
and then they die. And so, it's always hard. And I think there is that respect, I certainly can find that respect of, wanting to have a stable community and a place that you enjoy and you enjoy living there, and familiarity, I guess. But I also feel like I have transformation stories that I can share, but I also have ones that there will be no convincing, even after they've lived with trail for 20 years, that they aren't going to use it. They're not going to like it. I'm not going to convince them. And there has to be a respect of, let's try to live together in whatever way we can as neighbors, right? Because I have 365 neighbors, like if you have a trail corridor, you have a lot of neighbors. And I think we have to be like, the naysayers are the loud, are the ones that are loud often, right? Like, I feel like sometimes I need to be the voice of those that aren't speaking, which is our trail community, right? Like, I am in the room to be a voice for the people who do want to see a trail, come to town, and aren't necessarily going to be the ones that feel like they have a voice in that argument. And so sometimes my respect comes with being a voice for the trail user that's not there. And my example earlier of, and because I just 20 years later, I had this encounter a month ago of somebody wanting to be able to use the trail as their driveway to get, to drive back and forth to their property about a mile, across a bridge and, into their property. And we have this encounter over and over, and I see it happening in West Virginia a lot. And they'll say, oh, well, we will only use it once a day, or, all these reasons of like, we'll accommodate. And I want to be the voice for the trail users who don't want that, you don't want to encounter a vehicle on trail. You want to be knowing that when you're on trail with your dog or your kids, that that's going to be a non-motorized trail for the, you know, and so I often feel like, you know, the respect doesn't necessarily come with the agreement that you can have public property for your own access, even if you're a neighbor to it, right?
I do agree. And I like the point that you said that sometimes it's, you agree to disagree. I mean, on the trail, it's like the trail's coming. The majority of people would like to have the trail. We have the funding, the trail's coming. And although I'm not accommodating you, I respect your thought on that, but we need to live together as neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lois, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that one of our towns that just joined is Paw Paw, West Virginia. And Paw Paw is a small little town, but it abuts the Sino Canal towpath by a bridge. And there was a lot of resistance in that town about joining the Canal Towns Partnership, because each of our towns pays a fee of $500 a year to be part of the partnership. And Paw Paw was totally resistant. The mayor and the city council, which changed, the mayor changed a lot and the city council, town council changed a lot. But finally, the owner of a B&B took over the responsibility of trying to win over the mayor and town council to join the partnership. And it ended up that the Morgan County Economic Development Corporation is paying the $500 to join. So they put in a tiny visitor center right off the bridge this summer. And gradually the bicyclists were coming over to the visitor center. And the townspeople saw this and they were just astounded that these cyclists were coming over to learn about Paw Paw. And once they saw that, they sort of then respected that their town was important to these visitors and had something to offer. And kind of the attitude towards joining the partnership and being a part of this very large partnership right now kind of has dissipated. It's not gone away yet, but it's dissipated. And we're not getting a lot of resistance from the townspeople. And there's been some investment. I think they're building a small cafe and a bakery right near where the visitor center is. So it's kind of on slowly, but it's step by step. And each town is different. And each town's culture is different. And the players are different. But there was a lot of resistance and some very nasty comments on Facebook about the Canal Towns Partnership. So we never responded back in kind. We were always respectful and we just let it roll. And finally, it kind of worked out. So
has anybody on this group taken those folks on a tour to a different town or a different trail to say, this is where you could, look what happened here, not necessarily saying that that all trails, all towns, you're right, they're all unique, but this didn't become like some crime-ridden, scary place because of a trail.
So I didn't personally, Ella, but Mercer County actually was looking at trying to get trails really going over there in early years, and they paid for a tour bus or charter bus, and they chartered, I think it was to Connellsville, somewhere down there, to show them this is what can happen if your community is in line with doing something like this, that it takes the buy-in of the community to get it going. I think it was a successful trip. I personally didn't go on it, although some folks from the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail Alliance were invited to go. I couldn't go, but I believe I understood that it was a very successful trip. And I think maybe Greenville is the one that it was that community. I can't remember for sure. I think it might have been Greenville.
Well, Ella, you have me thinking, like, what happens if you fill that bus with a bunch of naysayers? Like, you know, put a posting in the newspaper of like, are you opposed to trails and like, a free trip?
Yeah, no, well, it was in a different vein,
Yeah.
but like in Morgantown, and this was in the 90s, right? The first trails getting built was the Yak River Trail, not the Gap then, but the Yak was getting built, and we had leaders not against trail, but saying nobody will use it because a railroad corridor goes besides 2 water treatment plants and industrial zone and you know, this rundown, and they had to change zoning policies to change, you know, to change it from industrial to residential and business. So you had to get council to make real policy changes to see a trail go through, and so yeah, they like put the CVB and, you know, a bunch of people that probably would need to be invested in it, but weren't necessarily anti-trail. They just didn't think that it would ever get use. Right. And Pennsylvania was a champion early on and was showing that, you know, they were going to get trail built. And so, you know, so we took people on a bus trip up to see, you know, that change, and that kept, and even with all of that, I think we did convince all those things to happen, but the nonprofit had to form to negotiate. It wasn't any municipality that said, we're going to buy this corridor and make a change. It was a nonprofit of believers that had to come together, and for, you know, 4 years negotiate with CSX on acquiring property, right? So those are the champions in my world of people who didn't have trail and were negotiating a corridor, right? Before you could convince them that this has been done and you've seen it successful everywhere, you know, and that they stuck it out and kept at it until it was acquired. And, you know, people who sat in meetings that had bank accounts of 50 cents in the bank account, you know, like saying to CSX, well, yeah, we'll talk about $1 million, you know, we'll talk about, we want to acquire this, and those believers. So, you know, I think it took, you know, that Pennsylvania trip to really win over a lot of people who were just not sure what people would actually do, you know, whether they would really come out. And to Morgantown's credit, you know, the community's credit, and it's mostly a residentially used trail. We're not talking about a lot of visitors. It's, you know, I'd say 80% of the use is from people who live here. Wow. Is that within, you know, a quarter of a mile of paved trail, and they're walking back and forth with their dog. Like, we don't care that there's a sewage treatment plant right here. We don't care that there's, you know, the river is polluted. We want to be outside and we want to have this happen. And so you couldn't build it fast enough. Like
that's interesting. Yeah.
To me, that's Ella, seeing that use in that first mile or half mile of a trail. You know, people walking dogs and pushing strollers, to me, that's become the sign of a successful trail, you know, because it's locally used and valued. But you sort of took me back to Kim's comment earlier about, you know, she's at a meeting and people are opposed and she wants to understand why. And, you know, it's not always that people are anti-trail. Sometimes it's that they don't understand the opportunity, and they don't believe in the investment. Like they think, even though we know that a lot of the time the same dollars that are used for trails are not used for other kinds of projects, like they don't think it's a worthy public investment.
Right.
And they don't believe that anyone would want to visit their place, going back to the lowest.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I think getting to the why really goes a long way, right? If we're trying to understand and respect somebody, and if we're trying to make progress toward our goal.
So I
Well,
know in our area, and I kind of smiled when you said that about the investment and the monies, because every time we get a new reporter in our area, I'm usually trying to get in touch with that new reporter and saying, hey, if you're doing any stories of outdoor recreation, could you at least put a line in there somewhere, somehow about
You froze up on us, but
building. Oops, am I
go
okay?
ahead. Yeah, you were
Okay.
asking for them to put a line or something about.
Yeah, about how the grants can be used. Like that grant money can't be used to make a road.
yeah,
That grant money can't be used to make a job, per se.
Right.
That grant money is for outdoor recreation. And the one thing we try to hit on a lot more than what we did before, yes, visitors will come and there's that economic impact, but it's for the community health too and community well-being. We really try to stress that in some of our smaller communities. That this
Right.
gives people a place where they are permitted to go out.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Lois,
Safely.
Kim froze again, but she's having connectivity issues, but I know you were going to say something as well a few minutes ago. So why don't you jump in?
Myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you had something you were going to say.
Yeah. I was going to say that a lot of the towns, you know, in the past, like say pre-World War II, right after World War, were prosperous manufacturing towns, industrial towns, and they had a lot of pride, and there were jobs, and there was a middle class culture, and then that was pulled from them. There is no more, and like in Williamsport, there is no more tannery. Had a lot of jobs. There isn't a lot of other industrial, you know, big industrial plants that people, you know, had their security, their job security. So these people are very, let's say, disappointed and resentful of any kind of change, because they've been through such like a traumatic, they've lost their pride in their towns, and they don't see tourists coming in to replace it, that's the same kind of pride, because it's people that coming in for a day or a weekend and then they leave, they're not staying there. So it's very interesting that now when they see success models in our canal towns, they're kind of saying, okay, I see, it's not going to hurt us, it's going to help us, and we're going to support, you know, not with our, you know, with our positive more than a negative attitude. So I think the culture, it takes a while for that culture to change. It's just, you know, it's 2022, it's not 1950, and there's a lot of change for these towns, and I respect that. I mean, I think we all have to respect that it's okay that they're somewhat fearful of change, and I've seen it in all of the towns. Each of our towns is different, but Brunswick, a railroad town, is now more of a cycling town. Now that's a big change
Yeah.
from a railroad town to getting in cycling tourists from off the towpath. So
It is.
that's my
Well, I appreciate that. That's an important perspective.
I also, it's interesting that you said the monetary, I also have kind of mulling over the fact that there are towns that I would hope we'll see that transformation and will come around, will have success with this, but aren't. Your idea of us talking about the investments and how that can mold and shape a new vitality in community. I've also watched where it hasn't yet. They have trail and they haven't, there's a lot of the owners of the properties don't put it on the market. So you have abandoned buildings that are sitting empty, and the people who own them don't want to sell or aren't living there. So they don't have, you don't have opportunity to have new businesses moving in those spots, or you witness some of those places going out. And so the naysayer question, I definitely believe in what Kim said, which was to say to folks, this money is designated for these purposes. You can't fix the potholes in the roads. That's our number one thing, right? Especially when the money comes from Division of Highways, recreational trail grants. You hear that Division of Highways and you think, oh, they could be, this should be going to making my car better, work better, and the less traffic and better roads. So I also believe in that, but I also have seen where, we can talk a good game of, well, we believe in transformation and what this can do. And I've watched where I haven't seen it happen in spots, and what, that maybe that's them saying, you've invested the wrong thing in this community. I don't know. I would never say that truly, but there are times when you see where that doesn't move as quickly. And even with a town like Morgantown, which has embraced it on certain sections, you still have spots of neglected properties or areas that people think are still, the bad side of town, or, you're still going through an industrial area, like you say, of this used to be something very different, and those changes haven't yet hit those areas. And so, I think that the naysayers, there are folks, again, that I'm not gonna reach with my convincing arguments, and and that, or having the right messenger, even, maybe it takes a grandkid or a family member or something else. But we certainly have witnessed in our country, right, nationwide, that we have a lot of divisions and different visions for what our communities should look like, and hard times sitting at the dinner table sometimes, even with the people you care about the most. So
but that is for sure. This is bigger than trails, right? When we're talking about respect. And go ahead, Lois.
I have one comment. But the work that we're doing in community development and looking at the possible assets that we have and we're working with is so important at the local level. because it's a model for people. They're looking for, someone to lead them down a different path. And trails are the perfect metaphor for that. It's taking another journey, going down another path. And I don't know, I find the work that we're doing still inspirational. And yes, it's hard road sometimes, and you have to listen to, well, it ain't like, it wasn't like this before, blah, blah, blah. But that's okay. It's okay, because a new generation's coming along, and they're going to want a trail. They're going to want to put their kids on a trail. They're going to want to be healthy, get outdoors. So I think in the long run, it's going to be a winner. And so keep at it, Ellen, because you're on the right path, and kudos to you for keeping at it. I mean, I really respect you for that.
So I have a question for everyone, if I may. When COVID hit and everybody was, going out on the trails and the water trails and that, did that help change any of your naysayers?
Good
Seeing the
question.
people.
That
yeah,
is a good
people out there?
question.
Personally, I'm going to say I did see it with some of our community leaders, and and I think before I froze, I was talking about I try to approach it sometimes from the standpoint of community health, and not because you can't just go out on private property. So trails provide that outlet for people, like when we were locked in with COVID. So I'm just kind of
Right.
curious how everybody else saw that, if they saw any changes with naysayers.
I don't know about
Yeah.
naysayers, but I mean, I think just that there was a reawakening or a realization on the part of the general public, and probably a lot of our elected leaders, that these spaces really do matter. And the people that we found on our trails at that time were local people, right? People were encouraged to
Yeah.
use close to home trails. And so I think there was just people became more aware of the treasures that are right there in their own backyards.
I agree. I
I
agree.
agree. What I had hoped, I don't necessarily think it happened, was we saw our counter, we had counters out, so we saw, double and triple the numbers of people on trail, even when the university, where University Town, was out. So the students weren't there, but our community was in larger numbers. So you saw that, but you also didn't necessarily mean that people were any more aware of who managed the trail, what my organization does, got more willing to, invest in that, or do, make that next stage from trail user to trail advocate. I don't know whether we jumped, like I would hope, to say that we had a more educated public or anything like that. And maybe I shouldn't even be wishing that. Like, the fact that we could provide some place for, restoration and stress relief and all those other things that we were, a trail can do, was probably enough to make me feel better about it just by existence, right? Like, the fact that I needed it that much more to be able to go out on trail and find some, peace of mind and beauty in nature and solitary moments, and all those other things. But yeah, it's funny, like, I want to say that the world changed and said, okay, we're all going to support our trail organizations. As much as, but we were all afraid of also supporting that local, that coffee store and that donut shop and, everything, right? So
I agree with Ella 100% on everything she just said. I don't believe our trail users were any more aware of who maintains those trails and who owns those trails. And I don't know that there was anything that we could have or should have done differently at that time, because it was a very stressful time for everyone. And who cares who owns them? I can go use them.
Right.
Yeah.
Same here.
Well, it sounds, I mean, who knows, maybe there's still opportunity, and, a change is incremental. People becoming informed is incremental usually. So maybe there's a way we can still use that to inform people. But we are getting very close to 8 o'clock, and I want to just, I guess, start to wrap up here. And I'm going to be honest, the thing I still don't know the answer to is, when you have that worst case scenario, when you have the vocal minority who is vehemently opposed to trails or progress in general, who is, launching a negative, nasty online campaign against your project. I don't know what to do with that. I still don't really know how to respect, that kind of activity and that kind of approach. But in general, I recognize that we all are in community together, and that we have to try to understand our neighbors, and we have to understand their fears and their concerns, and also their hopes and their wishes, and that a lot of the time they want what's best for the community. They just have other ideas around how to get to that, or what best is. Going back to what you said, Ella, about, well, what does respect mean? Sometimes we have to get clear on some of these terms and ideas. But I think this conversation has been absolutely invigorating. I respect all of you as humans and as professionals, and I'm so glad that we have been working our way through this conversation. I'm grateful to you for it. And the last thing I want to do is to launch a poll. So as promised, I have an anonymous poll, and I would like for you to take it and to let me know whether you're comfortable with this conversation being shared with others. And again, it's anonymous, so please, whatever your comfort level is, let me know, and I will respect the results.
It's the same opinion survey.
I appreciate you, Amy, willing to get us together to have conversations. As a lone person in this job, I sometimes miss the trail community just to bounce these ideas off of. So it's been nice to hear from, because we share a lot, even though we're so far apart, right? We do. And
we absolutely do.
We do. Yeah. And go ahead, Lois.
I think it helps all of us, Amy. I think the sharing is you're not alone in facing a lot of these issues. And thank you. I think it's a very worthwhile curiosity series.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and it helps.
I love it. I love the name.
It helps to look at things from a different perspective. So I'm looking forward to the next one I can join.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, the next one is next Wednesday. We're going to be talking about how do you get people who are struggling in life involved in trails and out there using them. I think that's one of the hardest questions for us. And I hope to see you next week. And if not next week, the week following. But thank you. Really appreciate all of your insights, and talk to you soon.
Have a good evening, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.